mention the word trust once. What has AI given us? Is it just a giant game, or has it given humanity something more important? There's a historical trip through the beginnings and the current location where we are with AI. I looked at a little bit of the history and the background, which starts at this very place. Very fortunate to be here. And then talk about games. So who's played noughts and crosses, tic-tac-toe? Almost everyone. Okay, so if you get to move first, where do you put your piece? Imagine your noughts. Where do you go? Middle? How did you know to put it in the middle? And after we're done with tic-tac-toe, does that lead us to science and perhaps a Nobel Prize? Now, in my pocket, I have a rare thing. It's called cash. And it's got a picture of Alan Turing on the front. Very carefully done. We heard earlier, actually the slide's a bit squashed up there. We heard earlier that Easter eggs are good as a good tripwire in large language models. In fact, the Bank of England, when they made the artwork for the note, put an Easter egg in the ribbon, the binary ribbon, under Turing's, on Turing's left side there. So find a £50 note and find yourself a binary to decimal calculator. Right, Turing made many significant contributions, and we have his original theory of computation. We now believe that anything that is computable by machine is equivalent to the Turing machine. He was here working on the recovery of the data keys for the Enigma machines, not an electronic computer, but the bombs were electromechanical. And in 1950, he produces a very readable paper called Computing Machinery and Intelligence in the philosophical journal Mind, where machine or AI or artificial intelligence is termed machine intelligence. That's what the British called it until John McCarthy came along. Here's his original paper on where he discovers the little state transition machine. And there's foundations to systems biology, and some people think that he might not have deliberately ended his life, but he was monkeying around in his home laboratory with some chemicals which were quite toxic. So in that paper, in Mind 1950, and it is an easy read, he looks at different ways in which we might build a learning machine. And this is the paper where he talks about the imitation game, what we now call the Turing Test, long since beaten, by the way. We've passed the Turing Test. And he looks at three different ways of building a learning machine. One is to program it by hand, like Doug Lennart has tried. The other is to use effectively the same sort of techniques as neural networks, using rewards and punishments. And then his third approach, and the one that he prefers, is using a combination of things we already know, for example, logic and probability, and use that as background knowledge to the learning process. So in 1955, John McCarthy comes along and gives a rather succinct definition of what AI is. I was very fortunate as a graduate student to have a 1 hour interrogation. No, it was a supervision session with John McCarthy. But now things have broadened a bit further, and if you look at the Biden era sort of codes from Title 15, it's become quite a bit more expanded. The real thing I'd like to bring you to is this gentleman, Donald Mickey. Now, Donald was the youngest of the code breakers at Bletchley Park, and he and Alan used to play chess together down the pub on a Friday night, where they discussed machine intelligence. And there are some lovely photographs in Kellogg College in Oxford which are a tribute to the main players here at the park. And the top three there are Alan Turing, Donald Mickey, and a guy called Jack Good. Now, here at Bletchley Park, Turing was working on breaking the Enigma machine, or productizing those breaks. Donald didn't invent the Colossus, but he was one of the people working on the Colossus. And if you're very lucky, you'll be able to peep in through the window of the National Museum of Computing to see the rebuild that Tony Sale, the saviour of Bletchley Park, put together, his team put together. But they were both interested in machine intelligence, even though we didn't have machines at the time that could deal with it. So, the games, noughts and crosses. Let's start with that. So, in the early 60s, Donald produced a mechanical device made out of 304 matchboxes. All the matches were discarded, and each box was used as a decision machine in how to make the next move on the board. So the game itself has nearly 20,000 states, but because of the axes of symmetry on the board, you only really need 304 state transitions. So what you put in the box that doesn't have the matches, first you put a little bit of cardboard with a V shape in it, and then you put beads in it, and each bead represents a potential move you could make from the state that you find the board that's on the side of the box. So you play a move, you find the state of the board, you take the box off, you give it a shake, you carefully draw out the inner of the box and take the bead that's sitting in the apex, and that encodes the move that you're going to make. Once you're done, the machine either wins or loses. The machine menace either wins or loses, and if it's won, then all the open drawers that were part of that particular gameplay, you add in extra beads of the bead that made that move. If you lose, you take out that bead, and then you close it all back up, and you play it again. So after about 100 gameplays, menace stops losing. Now, in any good game of tic-tac-toe, noughts and crosses, you should never lose. Okay? Winning is the next thing. It takes about 200 training cycles before it starts to actually win. Donald's son is currently the head of house at Kellogg College in Oxford, and he remembers this thing sitting on the sideboard at home. So here's how it works. Each of the squares on your noughts and crosses board, each of the 9 squares gets a colour, and you can play. So let's have a look at how Menace would do it. So for the last 3 steps with nought to play and eventually wins, we have some beads. We pull out the orange bead on step 5, we place the nought in the orange square, and so on. But because that's a winning game sequence, we then add an extra orange bead for the next round. And sometimes in this reinforcement learning system, you might want to add multiple copies of your reinforcement closer to the end of the game, because that's where it's most likely to make a difference. And a loss, we have the same sort of scheme, but this time when we close the drawer back up, because this last move here with the green bead helped us lose, we're not going to put a green bead back in the box. Moving on from noughts and crosses, chess was considered by people here, some of the code breakers here were chess grandmasters, and chess was something that they were struggling. Could we get a machine to beat a human? And eventually it happens in 1997. It turns out that the particular move that Deep Blue played against Kasparov spooked Kasparov. He couldn't understand what was going on, and he sort of resigned in a bit of a fit. I remember that time because at the discussion amongst the group at Oxford, including Donald Mickey, was, well, that's it, you know, machines are better than us. Well, maybe not. Maybe there's still one more game to go, and that needs to go. Who's seen the lovely Netflix movie AlphaGo? It's a fantastic documentary. The good news is Lee Sedol manages to win one game. Keeps their human honour. But the machine, the system is founded on the work of Demis Hassabis, and he was at Oxford for a while, and then Google DeepMind. And actually, Demis gave a nice talk as part of a private screening of the movie in Oxford. And after the screening, he was mobbed in the cocktail reception afterwards. And when everyone had left him alone, I went and asked him whether he'd ever met Donald Mickey and told him about the Matchbox educational noughts and crosses engine, which, and Demis said to me, oh, reinforcement learning in the 1960s? I said, yes. So the same techniques were under the hood for the Go playing system. So have we got any advancements, though, in science from these techniques? And the group that I was in for a while had tackled this long-standing problem of how we take the linear sequence of proteins that are encoded for in the DNA sequence and determine what shape they're going to fold into once they're produced to form a protein. Because it's the protein's shape that gives it its function. And if we can determine the shape, we determine the function. And this had lots of researchers working on it and made no progress right up until the maybe 15 years ago, really. But the guys behind the AlphaGo system, they applied the same techniques to protein folding, and they produced a system called AlphaFold. And in 2019, Google DeepMind published their results, and it resulted in a Nobel Prize for a computer scientist in chemistry last year. Now, with many AI problems or puzzles, there's always data at the front end, and usually there's an insight in the data transformation that's important. And what the AlphaFold team found, that actually making account of the forecast of the torsion between the different amino acids in the protein was very important, and almost came down to becoming more like a pattern recognition problem with heat maps that visualize these torsion components. The AlphaGo system taught Go masters new moves, and the AlphaFold taught protein scientists new science as well. So I guess then, what really is AI? Now, for me, I like Kurzweil's moving frontier definition. And he says it's the study of computer problems that have not yet been solved. In 1944, in the Colossus, what was the algorithm that was running in there? By the way, this is the first ever optical punch tape reader. That tape had to go around thousands of times very quickly. The algorithm was effectively the same algorithm as is in your T9 Nokia phone predictive text. Okay? If we think the decrypt for this particular ciphertext is this, then what's the most likely character going to be in Deutsch? They were doing predictive texting in German. Okay? So that would have been considered quite remarkable in 1944. In 1995, predictive texting was quite remarkable, and in fact, many considered it AI. What have we got now for our money? So from Alan Turing's imitation game, are we moving to ChatGPT's regurgitation game, or are we going to find new science? Thank you.
Thank you.